This is our very first time of using the Zoom feature in the live feed so that both Kathleen and I can do our sharing at the same time, which is cool. The last 2 weeks we've only been able to do it one at a time, but this time we get to share together. Today we're going to be talking about a variety of things. It's a little bit like a video podcast, and so we're going to be sharing some of our experiences, what we've seen, some of our recent experiences that we think is important to put out there. And the big goal of why we want to do these video lives is because we know that it's important for people to get the information, and reading about it is not the same as listening to people who work in the industry talk about it. And hopefully the information that we share will reach people out there that really need to hear these messages, because what we find in the work that we do is that so many people out there don't understand the complexities of immigration here in Australia. They don't realise how much one slight thing can make a whole application fall apart, or future applications fall apart. So we are concerned about our communities, and when I talk about our communities, we focus mainly on New Zealand passport holders and our Pacific Island communities that live here in Australia. We know from experience being in this industry for a long time that the information that's out there specifically for our type of migrants living here in Australia is few and far between, and very few people specialise in these areas that we need, and we see that so many mistakes are made across the board because the information isn't out there. So doing these live videos for us is an opportunity to just put out there more information on another platform. This is free information that we just want to share openly, because we really are genuinely concerned about how immigration affects our people, our families, all the extended family members, particularly migrants from other countries that are connected to our families. They are also impacted by how immigration works for us. So it all starts with us first, and then it branches out, and we see some things that we can help. And like I said, hopefully the message gets out to the right people. So you might know someone that needs to hear this information, but we're going to be talking about immigration, mainly for New Zealand passport holders. So that's not just New Zealand citizens alone. That also covers a number of the Pacific Islands. So Tokelau, Niue, Cook Islands especially, they hold New Zealand citizenship. And then of course we've got our Samoan community, Tongan community, even Fijian communities, where immigration has spread across, that does have an impact as well, directly and also indirectly through the New Zealand immigration system. So what we find is that we have a whole cluster of us here in Australia. Different rules apply to different groups of us at different times, and because of those changes over the different eras, what we see is that there's lots of confusion. There's a lot of mixed information that comes across social media even, and how dangerous that can be if it's taken out of context, or people are taking what someone is saying here and applying it to themselves when actually that doesn't apply to them. And the effects can be quite detrimental. In fact, quite is probably an understatement. It's we're seeing real life travesties, and particularly in situations where it could have been fixed easily. And that's what we want to tell people today. If you are in a situation or you're worried about something to do with immigration, the first most important thing that you can ever do is talk to someone who is specialised in this area. Don't go and get advice from people who have dealt with immigration, but they're not registered migration agents, or they're not immigration lawyers, because the law is very, very different for everybody. Anyway, that was a very long-winded introduction, but I'm trying to kind of map out what we want to talk about. And we want to do this on a regular basis. We want to come together and just share our experiences. And like I said, hopefully it reaches as many people out there that need to hear this. And we believe a lot of our people need to hear this information, because so many of our people are completely in the dark about how immigration works, or they are worried and they don't know who to talk to. And we've seen some of those cases come through even just this week, where people have delayed doing something about their situation because simply they don't know who to go and talk to. They don't know who to ask for help. And that in itself has proven to be really devastating in the situations we've seen of late, particularly because it could have been fixed easily, very, very easily and quickly, but now it's turned into a mountain of a problem that started from something very minor. So we'll talk more details about that later on. So we're actually starting a bit early. We officially weren't going to start till 10 o'clock Australian Central Standard Time today, but we wanted to test out this live stream business, and we've got to kind of get our head around how we're going to see the comments coming through. If people have any questions, we'll do our best to try and answer what we can. And we also want to share some information that's on our website and, like I said, some of our personal experiences. So I'm Edina, this is Kathleen. I'm based in South Australia, and Kathleen's based in Sydney, Blacktown, Sydney, or Prospect to be precise. And yeah, that's enough talking from me. Kathleen, you can jump in and say a few words now.
Yeah, I guess I really wanted to also support your comment about sometimes, when we hear a story about someone else's success in their particular migration issue, we think, oh yes, that can happen to me if I do the same thing that that other person does. And like you said, every situation is different. Everybody has a different circumstance. So you can't actually apply the same thing to yourself. You really need to get that help. And engaging the services of a registered migration agent really is a good key step to help you on the right pathway that you need to be on in order to sort out your situation. And I think, the real value in seeking the help of an agent it lies in their ability to help you apply for the right visa for you in your situation, and also helping you to prepare all the necessary documents to ensure that your application is valid when it's submitted. And it also can help avoid any small mistakes or oversights that can possibly make your application invalid or could lead to the refusal. So, those, as you mentioned earlier, Edina, about, those small mistakes that people can make that then can lead to some really detrimental outcomes for them, like a visa refusal, for example. And that's not something that we want to have happen to any of our clients, because the repercussions and the outcomes after that can lead to a number of other complex issues. So yeah, just to go back to that issue and to agree with what you had said earlier, talk to someone is what we're trying to say. Get the help that you need so you can be on the right pathway.
Yeah, for sure. And often people don't know where to start, and sometimes people don't even realise that they have an issue or a problem. So one of the big things that I think is an issue for particularly New Zealand citizens, we're the only migrant that I know of that can enter Australia. All we do is present a passport. We're the only migrant that I know of that doesn't ever have to physically apply for a visa application through the normal channels, such as either filling out an immigration form that you post off to the immigration department, or jumping online using the IMI account system and filling out an online application. And the danger with that is that when you don't go through a process, you don't understand that there are conditions at the other end. So when we come into Australia with holding a New Zealand passport, we present that at customs. We've filled out an incoming passenger card, although those have moved to digital ones now, but let's just stay in the past for a moment, because all of that's still new, and with the limited travel at the moment, people may not be fully aware of those types of changes. But for New Zealanders, we're the only migrant that when we fill out an incoming passenger card, by law, that is actually our visa application form. Those little ticks and signature that we put on that card is a legal document in more ways than one if you're a New Zealand citizen. We're the only migrant that card or that piece of paper or that digital application is actually a visa application. So when it's a visa application, there's further implications as far as the law goes. And what goes on that card not only has to be, the best answers to the best of our knowledge, like correct answers, truthful answers, but that document is held in a special place within immigration, and that's actually a legal document that can come back and bite us if we're not careful about how we filled out that form. So we just tripped up right from the get-go on the whole immigration process before we even land in Australia, starting with the immigration, the incoming passenger card, showing our passport, and then being allowed to live and work indefinitely. The whole notion of coming to live permanently in Australia has a whole different meaning for New Zealand passport holders, because we're the only migrant that are allowed to live and work indefinitely in Australia, which on one hand is a great privilege and opportunity, and has definitely been the gateway for many of our families over the decades to come in and set up a life and enjoy and be part of this great country. But on the other hand, because we're really unaware of how the immigration process works for us from a legal perspective, from an immigration perspective, many families have also been devastated and caught out in more ways than one over the years. And it's almost like a sleeping giant. Sometimes you don't notice anything for decades, and then suddenly an issue might pop up in your life or in your family's life, and then you realise that whatever immigration process there was in the background for you specifically now has a serious impact on your life. And often when people come to us at that point, when they've discovered that there's an issue, it's never a quick fix. So it takes a long time, sometimes years, to rectify that problem. And it all starts with that not being able to understand the immigration process from the get-go. So we are the only migrant that I'm aware of that is allowed to come into Australia through this process, incoming passenger card, show your New Zealand passport. And on top of that, we are not given a letter that we're not given an immigration, or like a grant notification letter, a visa grant notification letter that tells us that you have had a visa granted. This is what your visa means. These are the conditions of your visa. This is what status you hold. So if we did get a letter like that, it would say you're a New Zealand citizen, coming on a New Zealand passport, you hold a subclass TY444 visa, also known as a special category visa. Your stay is indefinite, your visa will cease every time you leave the country, and your status is temporary. And, and that's what it should say. I think even at that point, if people were to receive a letter like that, whether it was printed off and given to them when they come through immigration processing, through immigration clearance, that's normally through customs and those places, then they would at least have a piece of paper, like every other migrant, every other non-citizen in Australia has a piece of paper that tells them these things. Bar those that have been here from a long time ago, maybe 10-pound poms, those types of generations. But we definitely are the only migrant that does not get given a grant notification. Now, somehow, New Zealand passport holders are supposed to fill in the incoming passenger card, be aware that that's a visa application, even though it doesn't say it anywhere on that card on the front or the back at all. They're supposed to somehow know when they show their passport at the airport that they have actually just applied for a visa and they've been granted a visa, which is why we hear a lot of New Zealand citizens say, I don't even have a visa, I didn't even apply for a visa. So I don't fall into that category. Once upon a time, pre-September 94, New Zealanders didn't have visas. Our visa was introduced in 1st of September 1994, and we've had a visa ever since. So even if you lived here before 94, if you've gone overseas since September 94 and come back in, you were actually issued this visa without knowing. And to me, that's unheard of. I can't, and I've been doing this for almost 5 years working in this space. I have not seen any other migrant not be notified what immigration status they hold, what the conditions are. So somehow New Zealand passport holders, New Zealand citizens, whatever you want to call it, are supposed to know these things. And I remember watching the dual citizenship debacle in Parliament, for example. And it's funny, it happened just a few days ago, which I'm quite surprised about because, we even went to the High Court. So politicians are still having to resign because they're dual citizens, even now, despite what's gone on. How they don't know, I'm not sure. But anyway, I remember Barnaby Joyce, whose father, I think it was a New Zealand citizen. And Barnaby didn't realise that New Zealand's laws automatically grant you New Zealand citizenship, whether you've applied for it or not. That doesn't happen in Australia, you see. You cannot get Australian citizenship by descent. So if you're born outside of Australia and your parents are Australians, you don't automatically get Australian citizenship. But if your parent is born in New Zealand and they have children overseas, our children automatically get granted New Zealand citizenship, whether you apply for it or not. The same as with the UK. This is why we saw a lot of the dual citizens. But I always remember Barnaby Joyce saying, how were we supposed to know? How were we supposed to know that we were dual citizens? And I thought to myself, touche, how are people supposed to know these things about immigration unless you have studied this area? Unless you spend a lot of time in this field, there is no way any reasonable person could possibly understand how immigration works for them. And I do believe for New Zealand passport holders, we are so much further disadvantaged because of that initial application process. So when other non-citizens apply for visas to come and live in Australia or remain in Australia, they have to go through this whole big process. I mean, that's what we do for a job. We fill out forms, we do applications, we deal with the immigration department on behalf of our clients. It is a big, big process. And part of our job that we think is important is advising and educating all of the families that we work with about how immigration, the process, works for them and what each step means. And that's so that they can come out at the other end and understand the importance of what they are applying for, the importance of what they have gained, and the real importance of why they should go on and apply for Australian citizenship. Because from a safety, security point of view, that is where you're going to get the greatest security, is once you become an Australian citizen. It's and aside from that, you'll have the bonuses of things like entitlements and various access to different things. You'll have more opportunities study-wise, work-wise. If you want to join the Defence Forces, you can. So there's a whole lot of things. And we see also being rolled out across the country in different states and territories, access to certain types of home loans, grants, and those types of things. So it's not just within the immigration area, also in the financial area, banks, insurance companies. There is a big ripple effect, NDIS, the list goes on. But ultimately, Australian citizenship is where it's at if families want to be stable here in Australia. So that's where we see it's kind of like the starting catalyst of why so many things go wrong, why there is a real high level of misunderstanding or simply no understanding whatsoever. Right, that's huge. That if you were to take, I mean, there's 570,000 New Zealand citizens that live in Australia. If we were to take a poll on how many people know their immigration status for starters, you know, I'd say maybe nowadays, maybe 3 or 4 out of 10 New Zealand citizens will know that they hold a 444 visa. Maybe 1 or 2 will know that that's a temporary visa, maybe. Most New Zealand citizens will say, we don't know what our status is, we don't know what it means, we don't know anything about it. So that's where, you know, this foundation of a lot of New Zealand families has started. And because we've got the blend of the Pacific Island nations people who we have a strong tie through New Zealand, we've had huge immigration through New Zealand come to Australia. You know, we've got all of this mixture, and then we've got people from the islands who've come directly from the islands to Australia, particularly connected with New Zealand families as well. So you might have the wife comes from New Zealand, or she's got New Zealand citizenship, and she has somehow been able to sponsor her husband on a visa like a 461 visa from the islands. And so we've got all of this, and not just from Pacific Islands, that's from around the world, but we do see a lot of combined families with those immigration statuses. So they hold 444 visas plus the 461. And this is what we've seen a lot of this year. And I don't know why it is. I thought maybe it was called Kathleen joined us, but it's just actually been coincidence. And we feel like, you know, it's a sign that there's things going on out there, and we're just kind of relieved to be in this space to be present, be available. And a lot of our clients that have come to us even this year didn't know that we existed until recently, and had they have known, we could have helped them. Like, we could have absolutely helped them, but for some of them it's quite too late. And it takes a lot to be too late. You know, very, very rarely have I ever seen a case where we haven't been able to try and figure some type of solution out, and that's really disheartening when you get cases. Probably only a couple of times in the last 5 years I've been practicing, I've seen cases like that. But and it's not as simple as just, oh well, you have to go back to where you came from. You know, some of these families, their family units, they've, you know, got lots of children, and they've been born here, or they've grown up here their whole life, and you know, and it's not so easy just to have mum or dad have to leave the country. And for some of them, the chances of them being allowed back into Australia might be slim as well. So you have that compounding factor, and there's lots of compounding factors.
Yeah, absolutely, Edna. And I just wanted to go back to your point about the temporary status. And I don't think that's quite clear to a lot of our New Zealand citizens and passport holders about that temporary status and the impact on them. And, you know, we are seeing so many New Zealand citizens coming here with their children, and particularly, you know, we've kind of our clients at the moment, they have a lot of children. And you've mentioned it before, but I think it's a really good message to kind of share with people about this. When you're on that temporary status, it basically means you have to be a perfect citizen. You can't have any flaws. You can't do anything wrong. You can't, you know, the risks are too high. And I think I know that life gets in the way, and sometimes, you know, you do find yourself in situations that, you know, might cause you to act in a way that you wouldn't normally act, or, you know, for you to do something to a family member or a friend unintentionally, or, you know, without thinking we do things. It's normal, it's
Mm.
natural, we're human, we make mistakes.
Mm.
But because of this temporary status, you know, there's this risk that if you do something and you go to court or you're charged or there's a conviction against you, you might end up having your visa cancelled and then subsequently asked to leave the country or removed from Australia, detained and removed from Australia. And I thought that'd be a really good point just for you to, I mean, particularly the work that you've done in that area as well, and the families that may have, the impact that it has on families, you know, when that sort of thing happens, which is why we try to encourage people to apply for, you know, permanent residence or citizenship as soon as they can, you know, to kind of secure their future here in Australia.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. You know, and when you hold a temporary status, I'd say to people, your immigration status is as good as a visitor visa.
Yes.
Like it doesn't matter if you've lived here for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. You hold a 444 visa, therefore it's a temporary visa. And there is no catalyst within the legislation that says, oh, you're a temporary visa holder, but you've been living here for 20 years. You've
Right.
paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in taxes. You've been an upstanding citizen. You've abided by our laws. You've done all of this. You contribute to our communities. You've helped run sports clubs, church groups, hobby groups, voluntary groups. You've done all of these things. There is nothing in the law that says, you know what, we, Australia, we believe that you're the type of person that, you know, we want to keep in Australia. There's nothing there that says, look, give us that temporary visa. We're going to swap it with a permanent visa because you've shown that you're committed and, you know, there's nothing like that. You stay stuck on this temporary visa until you physically and actively change it by going to either apply for a permanent visa, or in some cases you may be fortunate enough to be able to apply directly for citizenship. So you skip the whole permanent visa process, but that's only by chance, and that's really by luck that you were here between certain dates in the past. And that's all it is. That's all it comes down to. It's got nothing to do with how hard you've worked or how much you've contributed or how good you might be. It's to do with luck. It's to do with laws that changed at different times. If you happen to be here before a certain time, or even on one certain day in history, your whole life and the way the immigration system is designed for you here in Australia can be so different from someone who's worked here for over 20 years and contributed and done all the right things. You know, I hear politicians say, it's a privilege to become an Australian citizen. And yes, it is. It's a privilege to become a citizen of you know, any country. And it's not taking anything away from that being a privilege, because it definitely is. But the concern I have with the narrative of it's a privilege is that with the privilege is bestowed on people who those in power decide it can be bestowed on. So yes, it is a privilege to be a citizen, but the process is completely and utterly distorted. If someone were to look at it clearly and closely, they'll see it's just grossly unfair. So how can the result of something be a privilege come from a system that is really some of the laws are draconian, they don't make any sense. I challenge any politician who might ever see this video to have a look at it closely. If they looked at how the immigration changes over the years have occurred for New Zealand passport holders in particular, any reasonable person should be mortified, because a lot of it doesn't even make any sense. And it's one of the reasons I believe that nothing has changed for all these years, because it's been put in the too hard basket. It actually does not make any sense, a lot of the changes. So you've got this unfair, uneven playing field, but the result, you know, the privilege is citizenship. Yes, we acknowledge it's a privilege, but how you get there is really, really unfair. There's so many deliberate disadvantages and barriers put in front of people who ought to deserve citizenship. Those ones who have obeyed laws, who have paid taxes, who have contributed, who have made their communities a better place. Who are the type of people that look out for their neighbours and, their areas. And we as a people have such a good reputation for those types of things. We also come speaking English, the majority of us. And these are things that Australia says it desires. And we also come with a lot of skills. And in some ways we shoot ourselves in the foot because there's so many of us here on this temporary visa with skills, with high level skills that benefits Australia. But because there's so many of us filling those skills, what happens is that it reduces those skills on the immigration skills list.
Yeah.
So, for example, if they needed school teachers, I used to be a school teacher, and 500 school teachers move over from New Zealand to Australia, you can guarantee that school teachers probably isn't going to be on the list because Australia doesn't need to fill them because they're already being filled by skilled migrants, temporary visa holders, whom they don't have to factor into their budgets on a whole, because at any given time, our temporary visas can be cancelled. The government could change the laws, overnight. They don't have to forewarn us of these things, and these are the dangers. And it might be thinking, it's almost like it's like scaremongering, but when you've worked in the space, you realise the power that government holds. And remember, Australian government are renowned for saying it is our sovereign right to do what we like. John Howard said, we will decide who comes into this country and on what terms. Those types of narratives of what government holds. And yes, every government around the world has their rights to do what they want. I mean, you've got the controversy over, was Australia ever ceded? And I don't believe it ever was. There's no treaty, all of that kind of stuff. But that's going into a whole nother area again. But for the here and the now, and the dealing with everyday people that just all they want is to raise their families, they just want to be secure, they just want to do the right thing. They want their children to be safe and happy and have opportunities like all the other children. They don't want their children growing up and then finding once they hit the end of high school they can't even go off to uni because they can't access enough support. We've seen families have to pull their high school kids out of school because something's happened with the main income earners in the household, so they now have to replace those income earners and start bringing in money into the households. We see crowded housing because of the different challenges and the fact that you're not entitled to certain things. I mean, we could talk for days about all of those social cohesive effects that happens, the social justice, youth, the vulnerability of our young people. All because, and it all stems to immigration. And we have charities out there, we have amazing support networks out there that have grown from grassroots level because nothing else is available. It's grown out of a need. Things like Koha Shed, Melbourne Tautoko Whānau, there's lots and lots of groups around the country that feed the homeless, and all of those things were birthed because of the huge cracks that New Zealand passport holders in particular fall through, or temporary visa holders, which includes a whole lot of the Pacific Islands nations people. They fall through, and there's no way that uneven playing field stops them from being able to achieve the privilege of citizenship. And that's where, it is a problem. So yes, we work in the space. Yes, we run a business. Yes, we charge fees and all those types of things. We have to. If we want to be in the space, we've got to be able to survive. Otherwise, we have to walk away from this type of work and go and find a regular job like everyone else and work in that space and do what little we possibly can in this space. And we can do, very little if that were the case. So, on one hand, we need the right support, and we need to have the right information be put out there. We spend a lot of time dispelling a lot of the social media myths. The amount of times people say to us, oh, but so-and-so said on Facebook, blah, 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 and it was wrong, or it was wrong for them. It might have been right for that person. But people don't realise how many layers there are, and that the advice you give can be so detrimental. And you're coming from a good place. Your heart is to help that person. But it'd be like going to a doctor and you have a chronic illness and going to your neighbour who was sick once, and this is what happened for them and this is the medications they use. So therefore, if you're really sick, I think you should take the same medicine. This is, and it could be something completely different. On the surface, it looks the same. But that's why you don't go to your neighbours or Facebook for, those types of advice. You go to a specialist to check you out properly.
You've mentioned, Edina, the fact that the laws for New Zealand citizens has changed so much over the years. And there's a lot of New Zealand citizens out there that might have a pathway, either through a resident return visa or could apply straight to citizenship. But there are some key dates there, aren't there, that we, I know you've put out so much information on the website about it, but there's some key dates there that people, if you're out there, you know of someone, or it's a relative, or it might even be your situation. If you were in Australia, on those key dates, you might have a pathway. And so that's so important for you to reach out to us so that we can assess whether you have that pathway, rather than you focusing on, Facebook advice. Get some real advice, get some good advice so you can get on that right pathway. Do you want to go through those dates again, Edina?
Yeah. So some of the key dates, I'll work backwards actually. Yeah. So probably the most recent key date for us is the 19th of February 2016. Yes. That's a key date in the sense that there was a visa that was announced on that date by Malcolm Turnbull, and John Key at the time was in Australia. That's the date that the pathway called Subclass 189 New Zealand Stream was opened up for New Zealand citizens specifically. Now that's the pathway that New Zealand citizens they have an opportunity to apply for a permanent visa. That's a permanent visa, and it's part of the skilled independent family of visas. And with that particular visa, the reason that date is so important is because New Zealand passport holders who come after that date, so 444 visa holders who come to live in Australia from the 20th of February 2016 to today, so that's over 6 years now, can never apply for that visa, no matter how much money they earn, no matter what skills they have. They cannot apply for the New Zealand Stream 189 visa, and that's because it is a significant date that has been cut off. We're hoping that will change, but for now it hasn't, and it still stands. So New Zealand citizens have to have been living or residing in Australia on or before the 19th of February 2016. So that's very significant. There's other criteria attached to that. That's the one where you've got to earn a minimum of 53,900 taxable income. You also have to be residing for at least 5 years continuously before you apply for that visa too. So, and we've seen a lot of New Zealanders apply for this particular visa on their own and be refused. Some of them do qualify. Some of them have not quite interpreted the legislation correctly, the criteria, and they've been refused. So that's a key date. Then we go back. The next significant key date is the 26th of February 2001. So what's that? 15 years prior, almost to the day, same month. Don't know what's up with February, but the same month. Yeah, they. The 26th of February, this one day, I'm not going to talk about any other dates around that, but just that one day, if a New Zealand passport holder was in Australia on their New Zealand passport on that one day, even to this day, what's that, 21 years later, even to this day, that person is considered the same as a permanent resident who's allowed to apply for citizenship. They still hold a temporary visa. Right. So if they come in to live in Australia, say the beginning of this year, let's say they were here on the 26th of February 2001, and they decide to move back to Australia in January 2022, they actually still hold that status. This is rare. I don't know anything else like it in the whole of the legislation and in the whole of the history. I don't know if there's anything else like it. It's the one situation where your status does not change, which is unusual, because even other permanent residents, their statuses change if they're out of the country for more than 5 years. So that one day, it's like winning the lottery.
It is.
Because you are entitled to Centrelink, you're entitled to NDIS, you're entitled to everything. You are still a temporary visa holder, so the advice is go and get citizenship. Use that to go and get citizenship, and then you don't have to worry about any future law changes, because I always wonder if the government will change that one day.
It might happen in February.
But probably realistically, it would only be a smallish number of people, but a lot of people don't even know that they were here on that day, because they might have been here just for a holiday. And that's where people get really confused about immigration. They go, oh, but I wasn't living here. That's not what the law says. The law says if you were here on that one day. In fact, we had a case just last week where we were doing one particular visa for one of our clients. We'd actually lodged the visa application, and then her movement records arrived from the immigration department, and when we looked at it, she was actually here on holiday in February of 2001, and she happened to be here on the 26th of February. So what had to happen was we actually withdrew her visa application. So fortunately, the department hadn't made a decision on her visa. We withdrew that visa application, and yesterday we lodged a citizenship application instead. Now that saved her money and it saved time.
Yes.
And all because of that one day. It was, it doesn't happen often, but I've seen it happen a few times. So that's a significant date.
Yep.
The other significant dates are between the 26th of February 1999 and the 26th of February 2001.
Yep.
So that's a 2-year window. Now, with that particular rule, what happens is that as a New Zealand passport holder, you had to have been present in Australia for a minimum of 365 days, which is 1 year, across that 2-year period. So it doesn't have to be 365 days in a row. If you were here for at least 365 days in that 2-year window, then you also you're also qualified to apply for citizenship. So you're another group that does not need a permanent visa. So those are the only two groups that don't need a permanent visa. A New Zealand citizen or New Zealand passport holder who was either here on the 26th of February 2001, or you were here for 365 days in that 2-year window. Oh, sorry, there's one more group, but this is a rare group.
Yes.
If you came... Sorry, there's one more section there. So the 27th of February 2001 through to the 25th of May 2001, there's a 3-month window. If you came to live in Australia within that 3 months and you claimed a Centrelink payment within the first 3 years, so up to 26th of February or 25th of February to be precise, of 2004, so it's a combination. You come to live, plus you might have applied for family tax benefit or rental assistance or gone and seen about, seeking work or whatever. Any connection to Centrelink, then you may be able to apply for citizenship. So those are the only 3 groups. Anyone else that was living here prior to that does not fall into that. Anyone who obviously could come after that does not fall into those groups.
That's the group that's
So the
called
people,
Eligible New Zealand Citizen Group, isn't it, Edna?
yeah, so those three groups are what form the eligible New Zealand citizen group, or what's more commonly known as protected special category visa holders or protected SCV holders. So anyone who falls outside of that are non-protected or non-eligible New Zealand citizens, but which I don't like the language that, I don't like the labels that the immigration department use because it confuses people. It's like permanent residents. You know, are you a permanent resident? People don't realise that when you're asking that from an immigration perspective, that what they're meaning is, do you have a permanent visa, or were you here? Were you here on the 26th of February 2001, or were you here for 12 months in that 2-year window, or did you come within the 3 months after the law change and you applied for Centrelink within 3 years? That's what a permanent resident for the purposes of citizenship means. So no wonder people are confused, and no wonder politicians switch off, because the moment we start trying to explain how this all works, they switch off. If it doesn't apply to them or anyone they know that's close to them, it doesn't mean anything. But it's absolute craziness. And people will come up with all of their theories about why the laws change and so forth and so forth. And, you know, I've been researching this area for over 9 years, and I can tell you that I've heard them all, you know, backdoor migration, going on the dole, the Bondi bludger, all of that kind of stuff. I can tell you in one word, it's all crap. It's rubbish. Yeah. The whole lot is rubbish. And, you know, if anything, it was just politicised. And when you have an election year, like we've got an election coming up next month, when you have an election year, normally you'll have a whole lot of immigration stuff, you know, and politicians win a lot of brownie points if they are anti-immigration. I mean, look at One Nation and, you know, anyone who's seen taking a hard line with immigration, they win brownie points because Australian citizens or Australian voters think that it's all for their best interest, but actually it's got more probably to do with human behaviour of segregating people, the haves and the have-nots. And you know, and it's a play of politics, and immigration is always a great draw card. Yes. This year's a bit different because what the global pandemic has highlighted is how much we need immigrants, how much we depend on immigrants, particularly in regional parts of Australia. Australia's a massive country. And how farmers, agriculture, you know, the meat industries and so forth are suffering, which is then having a flow-on effect to the rest of the economy, are suffering because of the limited migrants that have been able to come in, backpackers, you know, people on working holiday visas. You know, we see a lot of the Pacific Labour Scheme, people coming over, but, you know, because all of those things have been limited, it's actually had a negative effect on the economy. So, but when people are none the wiser, it all sounds good when politicians are bleating on about immigration and how they want to protect jobs and all the rest of it. So, so that's a significant date. And the last two probably significant dates that I can think of the top of my head are the 1st of September 1994. Like I said, that's when the 444 visa was introduced. So New Zealand citizens who came to Australia prior to that date didn't hold a visa of any kind. They were regarded as exempt non-citizens for a period there. Those are the types of New Zealanders that can apply for the resident return visa, which is only given to people who held permanent resident status. And to cut a long story short, those New Zealanders, it has been accepted within policy that the arrangement between New Zealand and Australia, the Trans-Tasman Travel Arrangement, it was basically a handshake deal between our prime ministers at the time, and there was a mutual acknowledgement that each other's citizens would be considered permanent residents without having to go through any visa application process. So this hasn't always been around. This pathway really, to my knowledge, only opened up in 2013, and but prior to that, New Zealanders were not allowed to apply for the resident return visa, because the immigration department would not accept that we were once permanent residents ourselves under the old laws. But anyway, the good news is that that's what is available now, and so we try to maximise that pathway as much as possible. It's how I became a permanent resident. It allowed me to apply for the permanent visa and then a year later apply for citizenship. And the last significant date that I'll touch on today is from memory, I think it's the 20th of August 1986. So that particular date was a cut-off date for New Zealand New Zealand couples who had children born in Australia. So if a child was born in Australia to parents who were New Zealand citizens at the time and didn't have had not applied for a visa or citizenship in Australia, their children have to meet the 10-year rule, which means that they don't have citizenship at birth, and they must live in Australia for the first 10 years of their life before they are automatically granted citizenship. So, and that does chop and change over time, but that's when that 10-year rule started for our kids born to New Zealand passport holders. So that's quite significant. If you were born before that starting date in August of 1986, then you were a citizen at birth. But the moment you were born after that, I think it's the 20th of August to the 1st of September 94. In that window, if you're born in that period, you must meet the 10-year rule. Funnily enough, when the temporary visa was introduced for New Zealand citizens on the 1st of September 94, if your children were born from the 1st of September 94 onwards up to the 26th of February 2001, your children were citizens at birth. So if you've got children born in Australia between the 1st of September 94 to the 26th of February 2001, they're born in Australia, and to either mum or dad or both are New Zealand citizens, 100% they are Australian citizens from birth, not from their 10th birthday. So we see a lot of this where people get the 10-year rule muddled up. But for those parents out there that might be curious, or those people that might have been born here in that time that are listening to this, if you're born between those dates and either mum or dad was a New Zealand citizen at the time or both, you are 100% an Australian citizen from birth. And it does kind of change again after the 26th of February, that the 10-year rule applies, but only to children who are not born to New Zealand parents who aren't eligible New Zealand citizens, which is very confusing. And I'll talk about that another time, because that's a big area.
But this is just so great, because these are dates that, people just are not aware. They're walking around, and these dates are probably, someone might be impacted or affected by these dates. And if it is you, please ring us, give us a call, or drop us an email, because we'd like to help you get to, discover whether this is a pathway that you can obtain permanent residence. Because these dates, even before I started working in this field, these dates, I did not know about these dates. And I know for myself, in my own personal situation, of relatives and friends who would definitely fall in this category, who came before in 94. And like you said, Edina, if you came before 94, even if it was for a holiday, it doesn't matter what reason you came for, that pathway is still available for you.
That's right. The only group of New Zealand passport holders that it doesn't apply to are people who may have come over as diplomats or with the New Zealand Defence Force, because they don't go through the usual immigration channels. You had to have been what's called immigration cleared, so you go through the normal channels like any other civilian. That's what activates your permanent resident status, that will be recognised under policy and has been accepted as an acceptable way to apply for the resident return visa. thankfully, because I think, I'd love to know how many New Zealanders have been able to take advantage of that pathway, because prior to the 189 visa that was introduced on the 19th of February 2016, unless you had a partner that was an Australian citizen or permanent resident, or eligible New Zealand citizen that could sponsor you on a partner visa, there was very, very a little chance of you being able to get a visa any other way.
Right.
And I know New Zealanders can apply for, you can be sponsored by employers and those types, and even the independent skilled migration, skilled independent visa, the other 189, not the New Zealand stream one. But I've been practicing for nearly 5 years, and I have still not done one of those types of applications for New Zealand citizens, which says to me, hello,
Okay.
which says to me that that the pathway, I mean, because we've dealt with thousands of New Zealanders over the years, tells me that that pathway is not accessed anywhere near as much by the New Zealand court as other migrants from other countries. And I've looked at statistics, and it is true. Like we're like right at the bottom of the types of people that would apply for those visas, and there's lots of reasons for that too. But yeah.
Thank you. I think that was really important to go through those dates because, like you said, with our case that we had before, it wasn't known until the movement records arrived, that she was, here on that particular date on the 26th of February 2001. And people can obtain their movement records and apply for their movement records themselves if they feel, that they may have been in the country on those dates. I think it's still worth applying for those.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and you've been with us since January this year, and one of the key important factors for giving right advice from our perspective is if we can have a look at people's movement records, and they can take a couple of months now, they're taking forever to come back. If we can see people's movement records at the consultation stage, we can be really confident in what advice we're providing from the get-go. So with our client where we had to chop from a visa to a citizenship application, she knew that she had travelled lots in and out of Australia, but she didn't know the exact dates. And the chances of people actually being here on the 26th of February 2001 is really slim. Like I could count on one hand how many people we've had that this has happened to. But, it's still a possibility. So that's why those movement records are crucial in doing, any kind of application. And sometimes we'll rush applications through because they're taking forever to be processed at the immigration end. So, like hers, we just got it in the pipeline because we knew it was going to take, much, much longer than what it normally takes. And thankfully, like I said, we'd only just lodged the application, then her movement records came in, I think, a couple of weeks later. And so we had time to change that and apply for citizenship instead. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking at the time. We've been talking a lot about that, and I know that this is live, and so people might want to go back and watch some of that information that we've talked about for the past hour or so, or they might want to skip forward. We've got... What I was hoping we would talk about today is just kind of refer back to the website, because we've been working on the website so hard, trying to make it a very user-friendly, easy place to go to start. Because one of the things we hear on an almost daily basis is, where do I start? How do I get started? How do I get started with you? What do I do? I hear that you guys do this stuff. I hear, good things and whatnot, but I don't know how to start. So talking about the website, I think, is really important, because for us, that's where it really starts.
You want to share it?
Yeah, I wonder if I can. Hang on.
I'm sure you can.
I'll see if I can. Hang on, I'll just move. This is a good thing about using this new app, because hopefully we can share.
We got this.
Okay, right. Okay. Sharing. And yeah. Hang on. Got to click the right button first. That's it. So I'll click this one. Oh, actually, hang on.
I think it'd be great for them to see the new website. It looks a lot more user-friendly, and it's the links are quite easy to get to now to book a consultation, and lots of information on there as well.
Yeah, that's right. I just want to hang on. I've got to move a few things around on my desktop so that I can. Just moving things around, and then I can share.
Yay!
Can you see that?
Yep, it's come up great.
All right, cool. So this is what our homepage looks like on our website. So it's morningonmigration.com.au, and it's been put together. This is actually our third website that we've had over the years because we've been developing it over time. And this is the homepage, the main page, and then this is Whai Hepura from Queensland. She's been our most senior client that was granted citizenship after going for a visa first, and then and I think she was about 84 when she got her citizenship just last year, about October last year in Queensland. So this is our homepage, what it looks like. It's got some latest news and resources here. We've been started a little monthly newsletter, so people can subscribe to that if they want some updates there. And along the top here, the menu. Can you see that okay, Catherine?
Yep, that's coming through great.
Yep. Okay, so we've got a contact us page, the usual. Book a consultation. This is probably our most used link. This is where people have to come to before we do anything else. This is where the assessment stage happens. This is where we can really dive deep into a person's situation and find out exactly what is the best advice for them and what pathways to take. We get asked about the consultation process quite often. So on the website, all the information is there. So this is the book a consultation link, and here it'll talk about, there's some blurbs about, the most commonly asked questions here. How much does it cost? We get asked that almost daily. It talks about our fees there, and the other common question we get asked is, what do I apply for? Like what paperwork, what form, what visa, what citizenship, and things. And so we talk a bit about that and what are some of the common pathways that we recommend. And the most important thing that we do point out to people is it's best to get the right advice the first time. And this is where we see a lot of problems happen, is people are not getting the right advice at the beginning, and that can definitely lead to bigger problems down the end. And sometimes the problems can be very expensive problems to fix. So if you thought sorting out your immigration status is expensive, it's more expensive to try and fix problems by far, and more stressful, and there is little guarantee that you'll overcome those problems. So that's one of the reasons we say, look, yes, it costs money to sort the stuff out, but you're better off to pay it at the top of the cliff where you've got options available to you than wait to go over the cliff and try and fix it from the bottom of the cliff, because that is far more expensive, far more stressful, and like I said, the chances of success are greatly diminished. So
sorry, Edna, we do receive a lot of, messages in Facebook Messenger, and people are giving us their background and their details and all those things. But ultimately, we still need to have a full consultation to
Yeah.
assess everyone's circumstances. It's not easy for us to just give a black and white answer just from a few facts. So as you know, you discussed earlier, all these dates could apply to a client, and that might mean a different pathway. So that's why we do encourage a consultation, just so we can assess all of the, your circumstances first before we can make a good offer you the right advice for the right pathway that's suitable to you.
Yeah, well, it's for people's benefit. It's to
Yes.
make sure that they're not going to be throwing money away. They're not going to be stressing. I mean, some people have no option but to pay for risky pathways because
Yes.
for whatever reason their immigration journey has taken them down a narrow path where they've got limited options, and we can't change that because the law says one thing and we operate inside the law of what the law says. So these are the boundaries, and our job is to try and find as many loopholes in those boundaries as possible to help people through that. And the hope is that we can take them through as unscathed as possible. But yeah, we're not allowed to guarantee success because it's a little bit like lawyers going to a court. Lawyers can't promise their clients what the judge is going to rule in the end. You can be prepared, you can have all of your arguments and paperwork in order, and that's definitely going to increase your chances. But ultimately, it's the Department of Home Affairs that make the final decision. So the delegate, or the delegates of the minister or case officers, or sometimes the minister themselves, will make the decisions. They're the judge and the jury. Okay, so consultations, people ask what does it include, and I've got a list of what it does include, what it doesn't include. What you might want to get together when you prepare for your booking, we talk about the process of this and payment options. And we've also got down here frequently asked questions. So there's a whole lot of frequently asked questions, and I'll show you that next because that's probably a good one to go to. But for people who want to book a consultation, so these are for people who are ready to take that next step of wanting to get proper advice, or some people spend a lot of time doing their own research before they get to this point. Some people don't want to do all the research, or they don't have time to do the research, or they've tried and they just can't make head or tail of it. So for people who just want to kind of cut to the chase and not muck around anymore, booking a consultation. So you can click on this link here where it says book a consultation, and that'll take you to a booking form. So this is our consultation form, and here you'll fill out your details. So just the usual, and this will help us to be able to put together enough file notes and our first meeting notes so that we can dive straight into the important stuff instead of mucking around, asking what's your address, phone number, email, all that kind of stuff. So, and this gives us, you have an opportunity to share some of your family details, your status, if you know it, your immigration status, past or pending convictions or court outcomes. You even can upload certain documents here, which does help us.
Yep.
And this box here, which says, feel free to provide additional information that you'd like us to know. This is really important. So we don't mind, we love it when people fill out further details in this box because it gives us more background information and it helps us to prepare for the consultation process. And then of course there's terms and conditions, and you will hit the submit button. We get notified straight away.
Yes.
And then one of our team will then follow this up and organise an appointment. And now most of our meetings are done via Zoom. So Kathleen's based in Blacktown, New South Wales. She's happy to meet with people in her area or surrounding suburbs face to face. We don't have an office yet in Sydney, but that's something we will work towards. And but for now, Kathleen's more than happy to do home visits if it's within her kind of radius of where she can travel to. She can arrange a place to meet if that's more suitable. So that's for people that might be fortunate enough to be close to Kathleen. I'm in a regional part of South Australia, so I don't get many face-to-face visits at my office. So most of mine are done through Zoom. Otherwise, if we do Zoom consultations, it's usually myself and Kathleen who are involved with that. So yeah. Was there anything else you want to add about that?
No, other than just to re-emphasize, that when you come to the consultation, you're going to get all of your options, and it will, relate to your family members as well. So I know that, especially if there's a husband and children, some children that were born here, they might already be, there might be a pathway for them in terms of they've been here for 10 years, have, normally been here, normally resident for 10 years here. So, you will get a complete advice relating to your options, and also a good recommendation for which pathway will be suitable for you. So it's worth doing just to know, so you don't have to keep looking up, looking at Facebook, searching for answers. We can help you get to that answer more quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And the consultation does cover a family unit. So sometimes people say, so our consultation fee is $660. That includes GST, and that involves the consultation that normally takes up to an hour to go through all of the information, and that covers all the family members. So sometimes people say, is that per person? Like if it's a husband and wife, do we have to pay that each? And the answer is no, that covers both of you and your children, or your household, like, if you've got mum and dad living with you, or even siblings, nieces, nephews, that type of thing. We're more than happy to touch on those as well. So that's all inclusive. So I always say to people, get all your stuff ready so that you can make the most of that hour, and we'll give you as much as we can in that hour.
And you do have your the 10-minute call as well, don't you? For those who just
if people just want to make a 10-minute call, there's that you can do that. It's $165 just for people sometimes just want a quick chat. They just want to know a couple of things. They don't want to know the whole shebang, but they just want a couple of questions answered. They don't want to sit on the phone forever with immigration, and they just want some kind of straightforward answers. Those types of calls are more suitable for general information. It's really hard to drill down in 10 minutes what is specific for you. That's where the consultation is really important. All right, so from there, probably the other part I wanted to share. So we talk about our services, what we do. Here we've got the status of New Zealand citizens. I talk a lot about, here's your eligible New Zealand citizen. So if you want to know what an eligible New Zealand citizen is, it's not just any New Zealand citizen who holds a passport. It's only those particular groups of New Zealanders. So this particular link I take you in, and I explain in a nutshell what you are. And then, but probably a really good one for people to look at is the frequently asked questions page. And from experience, these questions here are the most commonly asked questions that we get on a day-to-day basis. And it does get a bit tiring having to answer all the emails and the Facebook messages, and it's the same stuff over and over. So we encourage people, if you're looking for answers, general information, go to our frequently asked pages, and we probably will just send you this link anyway. And if we can't answer your questions, if your questions aren't answered here, then it's likely you need a consultation. That's if it's not answered here. The other section we have here is Vivo frequently asked questions. And for those people who don't know what a Vivo is, it's short for I think it's Visa Entitlement Verification Online, which is a long-winded term for finding out your visa status. So we can actually help you with your Vivo check if you're a New Zealand passport holder, because New Zealanders have difficulty doing Vivo checks as opposed to other migrants, because we don't have that grant notification letter with our visa details. So we can't. So nowadays you actually have to call immigration and ask them for a special password, and then so you've got to go through this big process. We can actually look this up for you 2 minutes flat if we have the details that we need. So for people who want to apply, we offer this as a free service. And we can do a Vivo check. So a lot of New Zealand citizens need this for their work, for example, or if they're going to do their own applications, they want to know exactly what their visa status is. So this is a good start. So if you want us to, I'll just skip back here to the home page. If you want us to apply for your Vivo, you just got to click on this link here. So it's a bit slow in loading today. So but here, how to request a Vivo check. So it's on the home page. And we explain how it's done. And here, if you want us to do it, you click on the Vivo form link. This one, and it's a little bit like the consultation form, but much shorter. Yeah. And this is the information we need. We get you to sign up section here. You can physically sign that with on your phone or computer, and because we need a signature to say that you've requested it by law. So once you fill out that, we get notified straight away, and we try to respond within 3 working days of these requests. So feel free, if you're New Zealand passport holder, send us your details and we can do that for you. But I'll just jump back to the frequently asked questions. And I developed a Vivo frequently asked questions section because what I found was I offered this free service. The moment I sent out the Vivo checks, people were asking me 101 questions. No, exaggeration, but they asking me questions, but it takes me like ages to answer them because there's no... You might have a quick question, but there's never a quick answer.
Never.
So for you, it's quick. For me, it's long. And so I thought, okay, what I need to do is just have some frequently asked questions. So when we send back the Vivo check to you, we also send this link so that you can look at the frequently asked questions, and all of anything you want to know about a Vivo has been answered right here. Saves me having to type in the long answers to you. All right, so I've put here one of the first questions we get asked is, what is subclass TY444? This is to New Zealand citizens. This kind of reinforces my point about New Zealanders don't even know that they hold a visa. Because I'll send them their Vivo, it'll say temporary visa, 444 visa, special category visa, all that kind of stuff. And, New Zealanders will come back to me straight away and they go, what's that? What is that? What is that? So I was like, oh, okay, right. So there's a little blurb about that. My Vivo says single entry only. Does that mean I can only enter Australia once? And the answer is yes, because the 444 visa ceases to exist every time a New Zealand citizen leaves the country, which means if the government decided to change the law on the 444 visas and say, right, from this day forward, all New Zealanders have to apply for a visa, because we've heard Moronga Migration complaining that we don't make them apply for a visa properly or something. They could do that. And if you're outside of Australia, but you live in Australia, you won't be able to come back into Australia normally. You'll have to apply for the visa and wait for it to be granted. Who knows if there might be a cost on it. Who knows how long it might take to be granted. So suddenly your choice of being able to come and go freely can be changed. It's not happened. I'm just saying it's possible. It's very possible. Immigration changes all the time. In fact, the Migration Act is the most amended area of law out of all the laws in Australia.
Yeah.
It is the most amended. So that says something. That's why I always say it's a possibility. I mean, the fact that it's been around since 94 and nothing really has changed apart from the 2001 laws, That's good. But then what that creates is a false sense of security that the laws are going to stay the same forever. And so I always say to people, like, you're best to get off that 444 because it's not like a normal temporary visa that lets you come and go out of Australia. It actually ceases to exist, and you have to be reliant on the fact that the criteria does not change whilst you're outside of Australia. Otherwise, you are going to be stuck. So, and actually during the pandemic, particularly when the borders shut down in the earlier parts of 2020, this had a major impact on New Zealand citizens for this very reason.
That's right.
Lots of Kiwis were stuck outside of Australia because they did not have a visa to re-enter Australia. You can only get this visa at the border. So you can't apply for this from New Zealand and get it granted and then come over. This gets granted by customs or border force at the border, at the airport. In Australia, at the airport. Yeah, it does not come like other visas where you get sent your visa grant notification. So that's why this visa is not great for those types of reasons. But again, it's been around for a long time, so people accept that this is the status quo. Nothing's going to change, but we know that things change all the time. And I think honestly though, New Zealand citizens are really, really becoming more aware that they can't take for granted how things have been in the past because they've seen so many changes before their eyes in the media. Deportation is a hot topic, and it's a shocking area. It really, really is. But that's not the only thing that's been changing. There's lots of other things that have been changing. I suppose in a way we can be grateful for the media reporting on a lot of the deportation stuff because it has highlighted to families that this is something's changed here.
Yeah.
And why deportation affects us so much, so our New Zealand, Māori and Pacific Island communities, is because we generally are the largest group of non-citizens who hold temporary visas. And that's it. By virtue of the fact that we are here in such large numbers on these temporary visas that allow us to live indefinitely, particularly by the 444 visa in particular, and the 461, because every 5 years you can roll that over.
Yeah.
Those visas are very, very risky in that respect. So anyway, that's why Avivo will say single entry only. And then here's another question. Why does my Vivo say I was granted the 444 visa the last time I arrived into Australia, but I've been living here much longer? And so what happens is that I when I'm doing information sessions, I'll pull up a Vivo check of a New Zealander who's been living here since the early 1980s. And the last time they travelled out of Australia was, say May last year. And so their Vivo check will show that they've been in Australia since May last year. And then people are going, hang on, I've been living here since the 80s.
Exactly.
For example. That's not right, but it is right because remember the 444 visa is a new one is issued each time you come through the airport or the ports.
Arrival,
that's right. So that's why it does not, Avivo will not confirm how long you've been here for. Avivo also won't confirm whether you're an eligible New Zealand citizen or not, which is going back to that conversation. And then it says here's another common one. Why does my Vivo say I'm a temporary resident? And that's because the 444 visa is a temporary visa. End of. But say New Zealanders do not know this. They're not aware because they don't get that visa grant notification letter. The only migrant that I know of, and I'm be happy to hear from anyone that says, no, these other migrants don't get notifications either, because I don't know of any. Do you, Kathleen?
No.
Where they don't. Somehow we're supposed to absorb this information from the atmosphere around us. Maybe when we're walking through the airports, it's meant to somehow permeate through our brain and tell us that, hey, don't forget you're a temporary resident.
Temporary resident.
You're expected to know these things and to be aware of all of the immigration ins and outs and pitfalls. Okay, how to change my temporary resident status. So often when New Zealanders get their Vivo check, it's a shock to them, because that's the first time in their life they'll see that they are a temporary resident. And it really shakes them, because they realise, holy heck, I've been living here for years and I'm a temporary resident. How can that be? So one of the common questions I was getting bombarded with when I first started doing the Vivo checks was, how do I get off this temporary resident status? So here I explain, either you can apply for citizenship if you meet one of these criteria, or you have to apply for a permanent visa. People say, well, how do I get an assessment? How do I know what to do? And then I point them back to the online booking system. So this is where you've got to go and get a consultation. I can't tell you in a nutshell. I can't tell you based on a couple of things you might tell me in a message. It's not possible.
It's too hard. Yep.
It is too hard. And it also, I won't give advice under those circumstances, because it puts my license at risk. If I give you the wrong advice, because I'm going based on, I'm trying to give you advice based on these few facts that you've given me, but I haven't explored everything thoroughly and properly. I'm not doing you due diligence, and I'm also not protecting myself from ensuring that I don't breach the code of conduct of, what's expected of me as a registered migration agent. So I won't risk that license, because if I risk that license, that means I can't help lots of other people after you who need help. So I'm not prepared to risk all of that for someone who doesn't want to pay for a consultation or doesn't want to spend the time. It's all good. You can carry on doing your own research or go somewhere else. But the thing is, without an assessment, there's no way we can give you the right advice. How much does it cost? Here we go. This is all the time. It's not possible to provide how much visas or citizenship application costs, as they vary in price, process, additional information required, and complexity. So I explain here, what are the variations. Like, the department has a list of application fees on its website, but first you would need to know what you need to apply for. Are you eligible to apply? Are you including family members? Are your family members eligible to apply or be included? Are there any major risk factors involved? Is more than one application needed? Is it a paper application or an online application? Are there better options available? Has your status as a New Zealand citizen been assessed fully? Are you aware of the implications of lodging applications and the ongoing effects that may have? So, for example, are you aware that if you lodge an application, you might not be able to go overseas for a while, or you might not be allowed out of the country when the visa is granted, or the citizenship process is being, followed, the test, the ceremony, and all that kind of stuff. And finally, are your circumstances likely to change? So that's changed during the process, and will that impact or affect your application? So there's heaps of things to consider. So when people say, how much does it cost? I was like, I don't know. I have no idea until I do an assessment. I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. All right, so that's frequently asked questions. And of course, I won't go through all of those one by one, but the Vivo is a good place to start for people who just want to maybe even dabble and find a little bit about themselves, and they don't want to know anything else. They don't want to know what pathways there are out there. They just want to know what's relevant to them. Cut to the chase.
Absolutely. It's a good start. If you're thinking about, what might be relevant to me, this is a good place to start. Start looking at the website, looking at information. It might also help you ask the right questions.
Yeah.
People to an agent. So get on the website, people.
And I just want to point this bit out too, because this is really helpful for people. So we were talking earlier about movement records, for example. If people out there are wanting to have a consultation, but they want to get their movement records first, remember, it can take a couple of months for these to come through. They are taking forever. They used to only take a week or two, but now they take ages. And I don't know why. People ask why, but I don't know, because that's a department thing. What you can do is you can apply for your movement records yourself before you even book a consultation. You can even apply for your police check yourself. if you want us to look at your police check. So if you're worried you might have certain types of convictions,
Yes.
or you've got convictions full stop and you want us to have a look, it's really helpful for us to have that type of information at the consultation stage, and then we can confidently advise what's best for you and what options and risks. Because sometimes, I mean, quite often the convictions are, I mean, the experiences I've had, the convictions is not an issue. It's the types of convictions or the types of the types of outcomes from those convictions. So drink driving is a very common one, very, very common one, and people often worry about that. If you're a habitual drink driver and you've even started to accumulate sentencing, so prison sentencing, then that's a concern. But if you've just got 1 or 2 or even 3, it's not too bad. It's not something that I personally would worry about. But don't take my word for it here. Like, this is just general. I'm just giving you a general kind of gauge. It is taken on a case-by-case basis, and sometimes it might be mixed with other types of offences. So you've got to be really careful what you advise. But having those police checks is good too. So under the frequently asked questions title, there's a part here that says tips on how to apply for various details. This is really, really important, particularly, and it has been designed for New Zealand passport holders in particular, but most people can use this, not just New Zealand citizens. It can be used by anybody. So on here, we've got some categories. We've got the New Zealand criminal record check for immigration purposes. It's not any old police check. Often people will say to us, I've got police checks for my job. I'm a teacher, I'm a police officer, I'm a, whatever their professions are. They go, oh, we have to do police checks for that. Can we just use those? The answer is no. Immigration will only accept one particular type of police check for immigration purposes from New Zealand and one particular police check from Australia for immigration purposes. They will not accept police checks that have come through any other source or category. So we've detailed how to apply for the New Zealand one. We've got the hyperlinks there, so you can go straight to the forms. So this one is, you can apply for both of these online. So this is what the New Zealand one looks like. Then you click on the apply online, of course, and then same with, I'll go back. Same with the Australian one. The Australian police check here looks like this. You scroll down to the online application and it'll start you on the process.
And you need to just have your identity documents scanned so that you can upload them whilst you complete the form, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So for the Australian police check, you have to have 100 points of ID ready to upload. Usually it's a passport and a driver's license, or it might be birth certificate, marriage certificate, something like that. But passport and driver's license is the most common ones that we use. And for New Zealand, there is a particular form that you have to sign. So you've actually got to download the form and sign it and date it, as well as provide a copy of your New Zealand passport or New Zealand driver's license, even if you've still got one. And there's a couple of other things that they allow as well, but you always got to make sure your passport's signed. New Zealand are real sticklers for signature. Your signature must match the passport signature. So when you fill out the form, you'll see here I'll just go back to the New Zealand one. You go to apply online, and then it's called a proof of signature form. So when it loads. So here you go, individual request. So when you're doing a police check for immigration purposes with New Zealand, you must do individual requests. You can't do registered third party. So you go through this, and then here you'll see a hyperlink here for proof of signature form. I might actually hyperlink that on our page.
Yeah.
So this is what the form looks like. You need to write your name, sign it, and you need to put the date that you apply on here. So you can't sign this today and then apply tomorrow. The Ministry of Justice in New Zealand will send it back to you and say, do a new application because the date's wrong.
I think also with these checks as well, it's important to include any other known names that you might have, especially, you know, if your maiden name, for example, for those of you who've been married, you need to include those former names in those applications.
Yeah, absolutely. So like Kathleen was saying, make sure you've got your documents scanned or, you know, on your phone, saved on your phone or on your computer, ready to upload, because you will be asked to upload those documents as part of the application process. And this one is how to apply for your travel records that are less than 30 years old. Sometimes the immigration department will give you, when your records come back, sometimes they'll give you records that are older than 30 years old, but not always. Most, well, probably half and half. Sometimes they will, sometimes they won't. The oldest ones we see come from the immigration department will go back to 1981, and I think, I don't know for a fact, but I think that's linked to the fact that in 1981, that's the year that New Zealand citizens had to have a New Zealand passport to enter Australia. So it seems for some people they'll provide the full record going back to the early 80s if you've come in at that time. Otherwise, it's for the last 30 years. And it's free to apply for these. It says processing time up to 30 days, but I think they mean up to 30 business days. And if you want to apply for records that are older than 30 years old, it's when you go to the National Archives, the Australian National Archives. So these are all online applications.
And free too, aren't they?
Yeah, the National Archives is really easy. You don't need to upload any ID documents. Anyone can apply for these documents. In fact, what a really fun fact is that if your records are older than 1971, you can actually go to the National Archives online and you can do a search of your incoming passenger cards, the originals. They've scanned them all. There must be thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands on there that have been scanned, and you can actually look them up. So sometimes for historical cases that we're working on, we'll go and we can actually find the original incoming passenger cards, which is really cool. It's actually fun. Those types of cases I really enjoy, because it's really delving into history. But that's where you get your records from that are older than 30 years. You don't need ID documents. For the ones that are less than 30 years old, that you go to the Department of Home Affairs, they'll not only want your passport, but they'll want your ID documents for any name changes, and I've noted it there. So if you've been married and had a name change, they want to see that document, which is a bit painful, but anyway, it's how
process.
I don't really get the big one. And if you've had more than one different type of passports, because you've got citizenship of more than one country, it pays to get your movement records from the different countries if you've travelled in and out of Australia on other passports. So you might have a New Zealand passport for argument's sakes, but you might also have been an Indian citizen, for example, and and years before you became a New Zealand citizen, you might have travelled in and out of Australia on your Indian passport. So even though you might not have your Indian passport now, it's still good to request those records with what details you have got. Particularly if you're doing visa applications, because we see the department will want those movement records for the different passports that you've used over the years. You don't need to provide all of your old passports from the same country, so long as you've got one passport from that country. That will help be able to, the department will retrieve all of your movement records that are linked to your current passport or an old passport that you might have. Okay, and then there's the Vivo check there. How to study for the Australian citizenship test. So these are some links and information. How to obtain your notice of assessments from the ATO. This is what's needed for the 189 New Zealand stream visa. Typically, you can go to your MyGov account, or you can contact your tax consultant or accountant. And I've also put the path here for the notice of assessment, so that because it's a little bit tricky trying to get it from your MyGov account. So
It's
follow that. Yeah.
a few layers to get through.
Yeah. Another common one is applying for a New Zealand birth certificate or marriage certificate. That's really easy. I love that process.
I think I need to do that one. I've lost my birth certificate.
Oh, yeah, you definitely. See, I was born in New Zealand. But it's so easy and it's quite cheap too. It's like $33, and if you want it posted by courier, it's like an extra $15. So it's cheap as. And another really important one that a lot of our people wouldn't even think to do is notifying the department of changes to your circumstances. So if you've changed your contact details, your address, if you've lost your passport or your passport's been stolen and you've replaced it, there's a form that there's a process that you can do to let them know. And this is really important for, I hate to say it, but for people who have had convictions, and if you're worried that if the department want to contact you because they want to do a review of your visa, which sounds really scary, but this is where you go and get the right help. If the department, what they'll do is they'll send their either email or postal mail to your last known addresses.
Yeah.
You will only have usually 28 days to respond, and if you don't respond within that 28 days, you can face an imminent visa cancellation. And the excuse that your address has changed or you don't use that email address anymore won't stand with the department. It's one of those things that it doesn't matter. You have to. It's
whatever your last known address was. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And the onus is on us as non-citizens to keep the department updated. So that's why that information's there. So if anyone wants to make sure that the department has got their most recent, up-to-date, and you only need to do this if you're a visa holder. You don't need to do this if you hold citizenship, because your visa can't get cancelled if you're a citizen. Yeah, hint, hint, become a citizen so they can't cancel you. People go, oh, but you can get your citizenship stripped, so what's the point? There's a huge point. For starters, the Migration Act, all the cancellation powers of the Migration Act only apply to visa holders. Those powers do not apply to people who hold citizenship. Under the Citizenship Act, they only have a few things where they'll strip you of citizenship, and usually it's a terrorist involvement activity. So it's got to be pretty bad. But the powers of the Migration Act, and they have lots and lots and lots of cancellation powers. They can cancel your visa because they suspect something of you. They don't even have to have proof. They can cancel your visa, but they can't do that with citizenship. So that's what the point is. So people who say there's no point, they don't know what they're talking about. And I say that with love. They don't know what they're talking about. They mean well, but somewhere along the lines they've got their wires crossed, and they think that citizenship is nowhere near. It's not worth the hassle or the fight or the investment. It is. It 100% is. In fact, all the devastating cases we see, if they had citizenship, they would not be in the situation that they're in. When they come to us desperate for help. So there's a big point. So I'll gladly debate that one.
Especially those with children too. We know that our kids can get into, situations that wrong place, wrong time. We just want to protect the kids. And if you have that chance to add them to an application, or if they have a pathway, do it for your kids. If anything else, do it for your kids to secure their future in this country.
Absolutely. And, one of the common things I used to hear when I first started going down this path of campaigning before I became a migration agent many years ago was, New Zealand people would often say to me, fellow Kiwis would say, oh, but we came here for a better life for our kids.
Yes.
That's why we came here. We did it for our kids, not for ourselves. We don't want it for ourselves. We don't want citizenship for ourselves. We don't need it for ourselves. But we do want it for our kids. And, it's so important to do it when your kids are young, particularly if they're under 18.
Under 18.
It's the best time to do it. But I also say to people, look, you're your children's parents. the fact that you have dual citizenship means that you'll always have the freedom to come and go out of Australia, even if you decide to go home and live. Like, that's always been our dream, to go home and live one day for many New Zealanders. But things do change. You end up with mokos here, grandchildren and things like that. So all of that can shift your goals as time goes by. But even if you do go home, regardless of what happens with the laws, you're going to have the option to come back and forth. And you know, your children are still going to need you. My kids are in their 30s and 20s, and believe you me, they don't stop needing mum and dad. And I'm sure you can all those parents out there can relate. They still need you no matter how old they get. So, you know, do it for your kids, definitely, but do it for yourself, because doing it for yourself is doing it for your kids too. Yeah. And I'm looking at the time, and wow, we've talked for ages, but this is our normal workday. But hopefully for people that listen to this live today, you know, this is an introduction. We really wanted to flesh out how to use Zoom, and it's good that we can, because we can't do this on the Facebook Live. We can't screen share and video at the same time. We can only do one or the other. And we can't share like how both Kathleen and I are live today. Next week, we're hoping to have one of our other team join us, Glenda, who's studying migration law over in New Zealand. And it'd be good for her to share some of her experiences, particularly for those who want to study in this area but can't study here in Australia. She's been able to study in New Zealand. She's based in New Zealand even, but Emily, one of our other staff, she's studying from here through the New Zealand system. It's a different system, but what it allows them to do is register for Australian, to become a registered migration agent in Australia once they are fully qualified in New Zealand. And it takes about 2 to 3 years for them to be fully qualified. And then they'll be able to practice over here. So it'll be good to have her join us and be able to share her experiences of where she's at. She can explain how many, I think she started 2 semesters ago now, and she's, lots of interesting information there. So for particularly people who are interested in looking at this skill set, this occupation, you know, as something that they would like to do. We know that a lot of people have reached out to us over the years and saying that they're really interested in learning more about becoming migration agents, which we absolutely need. We absolutely need, particularly people from our backgrounds, our cultural backgrounds, our experience backgrounds, because we really understand the battles that our own people face, because we live it. Even Kathleen and I are both dual citizens today, but we still have family members that, you know, are on this journey, and friends and whatnot, because it's part of the fabric of how immigration works for us here. So there's no way you can fully escape it.
Not at all. And I think that's the good thing, is we understand what people are going through, because we've been there ourselves. You know, we've had to go through the visa processes ourselves, so we know it's stressful. We know it's, you know, full of so many forms and things you need to get together before you can actually lodge. So we can help you through that process if you just reach out to us.
Yep, for sure. I mean, elections are coming up next month, and I'm so excited that, you know, almost 5 years down the track, we've now got hundreds of New Zealand citizens that 5 years ago, or even a year ago, were not Australian citizens. But we've now got, you know, this snowball effect happening over time, because it takes such a long time to get to even apply for citizenship, let alone be ready to vote at an election. But, you know, these people are ready to vote. And I put a post out last week saying to people, you know, contact your local MPs, even if you're not an Australian citizen. Say, what are your thoughts about, you know, how immigration works for New Zealanders and for the Pacific Island nations people? And, are you aware that there's all of these types of laws that make it difficult for us to apply, and and really just get a gauge of where they're at, because that might help you decide where you want to put your vote. We're not about telling people what and who to vote for, because that's all comes down to personal preference, but definitely educate yourself better, because it's great that you've been able to help yourself and that you've made those steps, but I'm sure more of you would agree with us than not that there are a lot of our New Zealand people and Pacific Island people out there that aren't as fortunate as some people that can apply, whether they can afford it or whether they've got a pathway available or whatever. They need all of us to help, all of us, and it's now's a good time. Now's a great time actually to contact your local MPs and say, hey, what's your thoughts about that? Share it with us, share that information, because we'd love to share what MPs around the country are thinking. And they don't have to be part of the current government. They can be, part of maybe all the other major parties or even independents. Find out what their thoughts are, because we finally are starting to grow a voting voice for, and this is quite monumental, because in the last 20 years, not a lot of New Zealanders have become citizens, mostly because they couldn't. But now that we are finding ways and we're able to provide that support where people can become citizens, and always when people become citizens, one of the first things I say after congratulations is, now don't forget to use your vote wisely. Don't forget you can now vote. Don't forget about all of the other Kiwis and the Pacific Island people that need us to be smart with our votes, smart with our, the ability to even have those conversations, because, politicians are going to listen to you more now once you become a citizen. But even, like I say, for those that aren't citizens, it doesn't mean that your voice can't be used. Your voice can add to the chorus of voters out there. It's about being smart and using our voices wisely, because it's a long road, and we want the government to open up fairer pathways. We want that playing field to be more level. We want the rules to be more fair, and we want to be able to push for the people that have worked really hard in making Australia a better place. We really want to push for them to have the opportunity and the privilege of becoming a citizen as well. So yeah, that's what this is all about. That's what this whole business was founded on. Philippa in New Zealand is still campaigning for the rights of our deportees and all that kind of stuff. It is all interwoven, and lots of people are paying the price for the immigration laws being changed, either on an individual basis or even on a broader basis, community-wise and even nationally. We know that New Zealand has been negatively impacted by the thousands of people that have been deported over the last 6 years, for 5-6 years now, and how that doesn't look like it's going to change anytime soon. But we do have, that's the whole point of why we should vote. Anyway, that's my little preach about about that bit. So I think that's about it. We didn't get to answer any of the specific questions that have come through. I haven't actually seen any. I'm not sure how the feed works.
I've just gone onto our Facebook page, and there's one question from Fiona. I'm filling in citizenship application which asks if I've been in and out of Australia since 1990. I'm confused whether to say yes or no. I arrived in 2006 but have visited Australia on holidays since 1990, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So first thing I
would say,
well, there's is Fiona a permanent resident? Hopefully she is before
Hmm.
she starts applying for citizenship. Because a lot of New Zealanders apply for citazenship because they assume if they've lived here for, well, one of the assumptions is if I live in Australia for over 10 years, because I heard, then I'm allowed to apply for citizenship. We have a lot of New Zealanders come back and say, I apply for citizenship, and then I find out a year or two later that I got rejected because only those particular groups of news not allowed to.
Yeah.
Not allowed to apply for it. So first thing with Fiona is hopefully she's a permanent resident. Hopefully she's done a visa beforehand. Otherwise she's going to be filling that out, for nothing.
Yeah.
But the question asks specifically, have you travelled in and out of Australia since 1990? The answer is yes. Yes, you have.
Yeah.
But even though you've been living here since 2006.
Exactly.
You definitely have come and gone in that time. So that's what the question's asking. But yeah, there's some of those questions are very strange. And I see why people get confused about how to answer them. No other questions that you can see in the thread?
Not in the Fiona has responded, yes, she is a permanent resident.
Oh, good.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thanks for letting us know, Fiona, because we have so many New Zealanders come to us that have done their citizenship applications and they haven't even, they've come after 2001 law change and don't realise that they need a visa first. That's it. There were questions in our
in the messenger, yes.
Yeah, in messenger and that. I could have a quick look. Do you want to?
I can shout some out to you.
Oh, you can answer them if you like.
I think we have.
I'm sure people are sick of listening to my voice.
I promised them you'd be on live this week. We've got one here. I hope you don't mind the PM. We don't mind at all people who are messaging us through our Facebook. I've been told to get in touch with you about where to start if my husband and I wanted to look into starting the process to become an Australian citizen. And she just gave some details and she's looking forward to hearing from us. And I think we do appreciate people reaching out to us, and explaining their circumstances via messenger. But I guess, as Edna has mentioned earlier, really the first step is to have a consultation. Because that way we can assess, all of your circumstances. And as we've mentioned earlier, there are some pathways for New Zealand citizens who can apply for a resident return visa or possibly apply directly for citizenship. So at the consultation, we can do a complete assessment of yours and also your family, your husband and your children, and that way recommend the best option or pathway. And we've shown you where to go to book a consultation as well.
Yeah. That was that one. Shall I read the next one?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so this one says, Kia ora. I'm wanting to get my permanent residency done. My partner and kids are born here. My partner is self-employed. So in between having kids, I've been working part-time hours. I arrived in 2010. I'm basically looking for the cheapest option for myself. If we got married, does that make me a citizen? Or do I still have to file and pay for residency? What are my options, please?
Yeah. Well, being married to an Australian citizen, if you're a New Zealand citizen, does not automatically make you an Australian citizen, unfortunately.
No, it definitely doesn't. And lots of people have asked this question over the years. And they want to know the cheapest way. It's, if you've got more than one option, then we can weigh up what's the cheapest. Sounds to me like this person might only have one option, so cheapest goes out the window. Then you have to pay whatever that option is. You've got no other option to compare it to. And that's just based on the details. There might be other pathways available, but we can't assess that without knowing more details, we need to know a lot more details before we can advise there. But someone who is with an Australian citizen or permanent resident or a protected SCV holder can at least apply for a partner visa. And partner visas, sadly, are not the cheapest option, but for many people, that's their only option. That's their only option. So those visas, and the visa on its own is almost $8,000. I believe Australia is the most expensive country in the world to do a partner visa in.
They say it is.
I've heard, but yeah, it's definitely so. For this person asking, it's hard to know. I mean, she may have other options that we don't know about that would probably be cheaper, but with that information, we can't say. Have you got another one?
Let me just quickly. Okay, I think this is one. Oh, I have a question. How do I start? I have a question, non-related to our applications. It's relating to her cousin whose partner recently passed.
Yep.
And the question I have is, previously, as in 30 years, she was here in Australia and was given a benefit for her 2 children at the time. Cutting a long story short, there have been 2 opinions via Centrelink, depending on who you get, I guess. One saying potentially entitled to support over here, and the other saying probably not. She's limited as still in New Zealand, and we're looking at options for her to leave and to head back to Australia. She currently is on a New Zealand benefit. 90% of her whānau live here, including her son. Is there anything she can do or apply or gain advice from? Finances are limited. Any suggestions or help is appreciated.
Yeah, and I said that for that one, I said RRB might be a possibility. It's hard to know. I don't know if she was here. It sounds like she was here. Might be. But I think that type of question is quite tricky, but it's good to know that for New Zealand citizens that were here prior to 94 especially,
yes.
So normally what happens when a person gets their permanent resident visa for the first time, there's what's called the newly arrived waiting period. Resident waiting period. So that's a Centrelink requirement which says that you must live in Australia for a certain period of time, and at the moment it's 4 years. It used to be 12 months under the Tony Abbott government. When he was elected, he doubled it to 2 years. And good old Scott Morrison, when he was the treasurer of this government before he became Prime Minister, he actually doubled that again to 4 years. So for New Zealand citizens, this is a real blow, particularly if you've been living here for up to 20 years already. Suddenly you've got to wait another 4 years. And this is another one that, I'd love for MPs out there to really get their head around. How is it the 4-year period is there because Scott Morrison's rationale is we need them to be living here long enough to be paying taxes, because we want them contributing to the pool of money that we use to help pay out in benefits and entitlements and support and whatnot. But that doesn't sit well with New Zealanders. Again, it's this uneven, unfair playing field where some people could have been living here for up to 20 years, applied for a visa, could have been working those whole 20 years, all of that tax money that they've contributed without being able to be entitled to hardly any of it, suddenly that's not good enough. They still, like other newly arrived, how can you call someone newly arrived if they've been here for up to 20 years? But anyway, that is how that will work. So going back to this question, if a person has lived in Australia, especially before 94, they can count that period towards the 4-year stand-down period. So let's say they lived here between 1985 and 1990. So they were here for 5 years, and then they come in, they go, right, we apply for them the resident return visa, for example. They arrived, moved back to Australia in, say, 2015. we apply for the resident return visa, they then need to access some kind of Centrelink payments, for example. Centrelink will say, no, you have to meet the 4-year stand down period. What we're able to do, because we're New Zealand citizens and we deal with this stuff day in, day out, we are very aware, and I have written confirmation from the Social Security Minister back in the day, so this is back when Labour was in, when this was under I think it was Julia Gillard or Kevin Rudd, I can't remember which one, but their Social Services Minister, I forget what his name is, Kevin Andrews, I think it might have been, can't remember, but anyway, he actually wrote a letter to my local MP, because I went to my local MP and said, hey, this newly arrived waiting period. So he's confirmed, and we've got the letter. We still have the letter now, and happy to share that with anyone. I could even put that on our website, actually, because people can access that. He actually explains in the law that period before, so let's say the scenario is someone between 85 and 90, that 5-year period is counted towards the 4 years. So, or if a person lived here for 12 months or 6 months or whatever period they were here, that comes off the 4-year stand down period. So that's useful for some people to know. So in that person's case, they might, they might need to be able to, they might need to access benefits sooner rather than later, depending on their immigration history in Australia. They might be eligible for RRB, and then they might be eligible to, they might have met the 4-year requirement, or they might, can calculate how long it's going to take. And I'm not sure if time between 94 and 2001 counts towards that newly arrived waiting period, but I do know definitely 100% from September 94 backwards does, 100%, I know that. We've had cases where we've helped support our clients with those types of cases, and we've won. They've had to take it to the AAT a few times, but it's clear. It says it clearly in the law that time counts.
That would be a good case for someone for them to actually get their movement records too, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely.
To clarify, have that, before they make that decision to come over, and make sure they have an option.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. That's another instance where the movement records is really valuable. I'll do one more because we're ticking on a time. Well, this will be the last one. Okay. So this one says, hi, I'm inquiring to see costs and what is required for a visa for myself and my child. My child was born here to New Zealand citizens and has turned 10 years old. They say, I think from looking online, the process for my son is relatively easy. And if you're IT savvy and you're good with computers and online stuff, then you should hopefully be able to navigate your way through that. Now, for this person, they say they arrived in Australia permanently in 2007. They've worked there ever since, so that's 15 years. I know that off the top of my head because I've been here since 2007.
Oh.
That's the only reason I know. They took a year off when their son was born. Never had income over the 54,000 threshold until recently. This year will be their first year. Their partner of 2 years is an Australian citizen. And they're going into, so this person's doing an apprenticeship, going into their second year, and then their income will be up around the 70+ K. So they're saying, from what I see online, I could possibly apply for the partner temp perm visa, which would grant me PR, ? The cost 7,000, or wait until I have an income of 54,000 plus, so another couple of years to apply. Could you please let me know if you could help me, your fees and what visa you think would apply to me? I'm not in a huge hurry, although I'd like to get the ball rolling for my son's citizenship. So those are quite long. I mean, those are not quick questions. And remember I said There is no such thing as a quick answer. All answers are long. So to try and even answer those questions in a Facebook message is not appropriate. It would not even come close to telling that person what they need to know. And, and it's not their fault, because people don't know what they don't know, and they don't understand the industry, they don't understand the complexities and how the laws work. So we do get lots and lots and lots of messages where people are giving us their life story and wanting us to, give them some quick answers. But we just have to keep pointing people back to the book of consultation stage. And it's not because we want to make money from consultations, it's because we can't give advice without spending that time properly. It's not doing, it's not helping anybody. In fact, it's doing people a disservice if we start trying to give advice there, which is why we kind of do the lives and explain things in more detail and point you back. There are frequently asked questions sections. There's lots of information out there, but we do understand it is confusing to try and understand.
Yes.
And if you're really serious and you want to know the answers to your immigration questions, honestly, the best way is a consultation. End of story. Okay, well, we've done really well. We've talked for 2 hours.
Oh, wow. That went by so quickly.
So
I didn't think you'd have enough to talk about.
Oh, we could talk for days. We could talk for days. So much information out there, but hopefully, for those people that watch any parts of this live, we really do hope that this type of information is going to be useful to people out there. We're going to leave the lives there so that people can come back at any given time and watch these, so that it's an ongoing resource, because that's what we see, is that there's not enough resources, there's not enough people in these professional spaces having open and honest conversations around immigration and how it affects our cluster of people, the New Zealand and Pacific Island nations people, plus their family members. That's who we really are focusing on, because that's where we believe there's an enormous lack of resources, there's an enormous lack of expertise and support. So that's why these sessions are important, and you can join us now that we know how to do this. I'm so excited. And next week, Glenda's going to join us, and she's going to talk about what it's been like so far with her studies to becoming I think they call it licensed immigration advisor in New Zealand.
Yes.
And it's going to help us too, because sometimes the cases that we work with, we actually have to know the New Zealand law side, but we don't work in the New Zealand law side, Kathleen and I, so we really don't know much. And New Zealand is, believe it or not, much stricter with its immigration processes than Australia, in the sense that only licensed immigration advisors are allowed to not only provide advice, but the immigration department in New Zealand will not accept applications from people unless it's directly the applicants themselves or through a licensed immigration advisor. And licensed immigration advisors, whereas Australia, the immigration department will accept applications from migration agents, applicants themselves, and anyone who calls themselves an immigration consultant or advisor or agent from overseas, even if they're not licensed. Whereas New Zealand will not accept them unless you're licensed. And I don't know why Australia doesn't do that, because that would protect consumers so much more. But she'll talk to us about that, and it's good to know the comparisons. But the New Zealand immigration system does also support and help families here that we work with. So having that combination is going to be such a valuable asset to what, broadening what we can provide as far as advice and support. So yeah, goody. Glenda will be able to go through an hour, won't you, Kaz?
Yes.
I say Kaz because Glenda's my first cousin.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah. So yeah, cool. All right then, now I've got to figure out how to, I'll stop this. And but it goes back to Zoom. Oh gosh, it's a little bit like trying to learn how to drive a car all over again. I'm going to go I've got to go stop share,
That's it.
and then I can go stop live stream. All right. Kaki everyone, have a good long weekend. It's Anzac Day coming up, public holiday on Monday, and yes, how poignant. It's Anzac Day, just around the corner. Let's remember what Anzac stands for.
Okay.
All right, take care everyone. Bye for now.
Great weekend.